Hello and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast. I'm Josh.
I'm Mattie.
And can't you see where podcasts are kept bright, tripping on the water like a laughing podcast? I think I might give up on like trying
I
to
genuinely forgot
incorporate
you did
lyrics.
that as a bit, and when you
Yeah,
started doing
yeah.
it, I was just like, "What the fuck is he doing?"
I think it's 2020, so I got to bring it back. I got to bring it back. But I feel like these three albums, there weren't many moments that lent themselves well to a bit.
You fucked me so good, you made me say, "Let's record."
Yeah. There we go. Anyway,
Awesome.
how's it going, Maddie?
It's going good actually. Like ready to go back to uni. What am I doing with my life?
Well, I'll tell you what you're not doing, Maddie.
What's that?
You're not currently at the Nintendo World theme park in Universal
No,
Studios Japan, which
no.
was recently announced with a Charlie XCX music video
Apparently,
in which she sung an a cappella with Toad.
oh, that was beautiful, man.
But I'm really happy about that Charlie XCX kind of standing atop as the queen of Nintendo World. And speaking of LGBT icons, did you see the recent ContraPoints video about cancellation?
I did. I did recently see the ContraPoints video of cancellation, part one of two. She said, which it was like the ending
Really?
of yeah. At the end, she just went, "I this isn't enough. I think I'm gonna do it. There's a part two coming."
She Infinity Ward it?
She in fucking Infinity Ward it. She dusted all the fucking no, I can't say petty. Yeah, petty cancellers. And then went
I think my biggest fear, my genuine biggest fear, is that we defend the ContraPoints cancellation thing and somehow get like cast as alt-right
yeah.
podcasting.
Yeah, no, no,
That's
I do
genuinely my
agree.
biggest fear.
No, it's scary. But isn't that kind of like, it's really fucking horrifying that that's the dichotomy that they've created. It is like the cancellate the stuff because they were literally intending on canceling her, and it was like, it's just no, like it's just so ridiculous. Like there's no room for error anymore.
Yeah, I think for me, what is the most prevalent issue in this matter is in a time, if we really want true emancipation with like LGBT movements and race relation talks and all sorts of kind of nice 60s kind of topics that we should have dealt with 50 years ago, frankly, but hey, we're still here.
Yeah.
We need like to be able to have open discussion and people shouldn't feel afraid to like voice their opinion, and then when that opinion is voiced it should be met with someone who's actually listening and says, hey, I think you're being a bit insensitive, here is how you could possibly change how you're thinking, and then that other person says, oh, thank you for informing me, now I am a more informed person and we've like formed dialogue and I view you as a human being. But when it's all responded with just outrage and hatred, like
Yeah.
that's just going to perpetuate more hate. I mean, to quote Yoda from episode one, Phantom of the Menace,
Oh
hate
no.
begets fear, fear begets hatred, and hatred. I don't remember the quote, but somehow this leads to the dark side,
No,
and
but
yeah,
it's true. Like I do think a lot of it comes from a place of fear. And my biggest problem with the cancellation stuff is I feel like with them they automatically went, well, ContraPoints isn't going to listen to us if we try to criticize her. Let's just jump straight to canceling. There were people obviously who were like, hey, Contra, we feel like you fucked up in this instance. Quite a lot of people, and she does talk about that in the video. What I'm specifically talking about is the people who outright just were, if you look at their tweets, and there's like a ridiculous number of them, they are just like, let's tear this person down. I also, after the video, I really wanted to look around and see what some fellow trans people thought of the video. And I found something in this one video where one of the tweets that Contra got cancelled for, that she felt like everyone having to state their pronouns when everyone else is obviously cis is just a statement that she's been clocked and makes her feel uncomfortable as a result. And then in this video, this other trans person, and they were on Contra's side in this, but they said that's a really like passing privileged statement to make as a trans woman. And I just thought, like, is it really privileged? Like, I feel like if you said that to anyone who wasn't trans, they would go, "Oh yeah, that sucks." I feel like we're at a point in our community where we're so obsessed with privilege, that like people can't complain anymore. Like, we're not privileged. Trans women aren't privileged. How can you take the legitimate complaints of a trans woman and just go, well, she passes, so she shouldn't really be talking about that on Twitter? Like, I just think that sucks. And I think I think we shouldn't be talking about trans issues without ever considering the varied privilege of our community. Like, obviously, black trans women are so much more vulnerable than white trans women, but I don't think that should go to the extent where the problems that do face passing women aren't allowed to be talked about because there are people who suffer worse.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up good points. And if you look at like, I don't know, second wave feminism, you can have both your Jermaine Greer, back before she became a TERF, and your Angela Davis. Like those two things can exist at the same time and should both be taken seriously. It's not either or. And I've been reading The Handmaid's Tale recently, and of course the allegory isn't perfect because that story is more about kind of cis woman feminism, and there's not really anything of trans issues in there. But a big thing in that novel is this idea of kind of there's this patriarchy, which is the man, obviously, who is the real villain, but they sort of pit the women against each other. Like you have the women who are higher ranking, and there's animosity between them and the lower ranking women. And it's kind of this idea of like in marginalized communities, there needs to be kind of unity. We need to like not forget who the real sort of oppressor is.
Yeah.
And for kind of diverse and interesting discussion to be held, people in minorities should feel like their own community is safe for them to talk about things that they've experienced. And sure, people can say that, hey, I don't think that's very important, but kind of sending death threats or really
Violent
nasty,
threat.
horrible messages is not the same thing as constructive criticism.
No, totally. And I'll wrap up with this, but like with say with The Handmaid's Tale, like as a trans woman, that story doesn't represent me or my needs at all. But I'm not saying like that shouldn't exist or that that's a fault with it.
Atwood is like privileged because she doesn't have to deal with being trans.
Being trans. Like I'm like, oh, how could you complain about like issues with childbirth? I don't even get those rights. Like what? And I think ultimately the way we're gonna tackle these issues is if we treat them as one large systemic issue that we need to face together and take the needs of each community. Tweets on the internet aren't really a part of that. Like that was not a political manifesto by Contra, that tweet. Why the fuck are we placing so much value and like considering people's tweets as like their dogmatic political views? I do not understand the link between going that this is an issue of being a trans woman that sucks, that's relatively privileged, and then saying that this is, and then saying like, oh, these are the only issues that I care about. Especially when you have literally the most like cohesive, like I guess videography, ridiculous number of intersectional issues for trans women. So yeah, that's like all I have to say. Cancel culture is fucking outdated and ridiculous. I do still feel there's a place for canceling when like it's obvious that people are just outright vitriolic, racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, whatever, and are just like there are obviously people that we do not need to try to reach, which is a point Contra makes in the video as well. We don't need to cancel people that are massive positive figures in our community over tiny mistakes.
All right, well, that was a great diatribe. Thank you for that. And now we will move on to talking about three very privileged white women with our album reviews this week. So first up, we'll be talking about Taylor Swift, Lover, released in 2019. Second up, we'll be talking about Norman fucking Rockwell, An album by Lana Del Rey from 2019. That's the correct pronunciation, by the way. And third up, we will have our classic kind of
retro
pop album. Because we've kind of got like a pink glossy pop theme happening. I mean, Lana's color palette goes off a bit, but sonically, I think she fits into this kind of arena.
I agree.
We'll be talking about Kate Bush's classic Hounds of Love from 1985. There'll be no secret about my love for this album when we get to discussing it. It is one of my fabled 10 out of 10 albums. I think it's absolutely perfect. So I'm very excited to talk about it at the end of the podcast. But first, we have to start at Lover. So I think before I ask you what your history of Taylor Swift is, I like to set a little bit of context for this album.
Go for it.
This is coming right off of so everyone knows who Taylor Swift is, right? But the way I view this album is it's kind of her attempting to make herself likable again after the Reputation kind of era of Taylor and the shit with Kanye. And we're doing a Kanye retrospective, and we will talk about Taylor Swift when we get there. But yeah, the shit with Kanye and Kim Kardashian calling her out as a quote-unquote snake, it was all very TMZ, you know? And she released that very bitter, unlikable album. I didn't listen to all of it. However, it was just so standoffish and kind of like, it was kind of difficult to embrace her as a public persona. So Lover, I feel like, was her attempt to soften her image and bring herself back down to like, look, I'm just a normal girl like you. That's just some context for this album. What is your history of Taylor Swift?
I believe not much. I think for a while her stuff wasn't on Spotify, or at least 1989 wasn't on Spotify.
None of it was on any streaming services for a very long time.
Yeah, so I actually was going to try out 1989, but I didn't because of that reason, and so I don't. And that's not really that's not because I didn't want to. I heard Bad Blood. I've heard a few singles of hers, Bad Blood, and that absolutely terrible one that was like, look what you made me do, look at what you made me do, which is one of the worst pop songs of the decade. To wrap up, no, I have very little history with her, just more because of limitations rather than my own bias against her.
My history of Taylor Swift is, I think my earliest memory of her music was a song she did with Ed Sheeran back when I was like 10 years old, 11 years old. So her recent stuff, I listened to 1989, and it was an album I really struggled with because there was like, I think 3 songs on it that I really loved, and I really wanted to like the whole thing. I don't know why, but I was kind of vying for her in some ways, and I wanted to like it. But there was lots of it that were just quite bland, forgettable, repetitive, but nothing really offensive. So it was just like, you know, lots of it I've kind of forgotten about, but there are 3 songs on that album that I really love, such as the song Style. I think it's a fantastic song. And then you get Reputation, which like you said, the Look What You Made Me Do single was fucking god awful. So I stayed the hell away from that album. I did not listen to it.
The album art is also abjectly terrible.
I heard one song from it called Getaway Car, which was pretty good. It kind of sounds like what would come, the better stuff that would come in this Lover album. And yeah, so that brings us to Lover. And I, like, when this album came out, I wasn't really like super excited for it, but like I really adored the album cover. I loved the kind of the blue shirt and the blue tipped hair and like the pink clouds in the background. It was so nice returning to like a softer, more like less spiteful and bitter Taylor. And you know, and in a way, she'll criticize me, I think, for feeling this way on songs like "The Man," where she feels like if she was a man, then the Reputation album would have gone over way better. I don't know how true I think this is. I think if we take a man that's been coming up a lot in this discussion, Kanye West, he wasn't well received for being obnoxious and confrontational at all. And I think there's exactly. I think there's definitely been some gender bias that has happened to Taylor in her career. I just question if The Man was the best representation of such a gender bias you could have done. And in 2 albums time, we'll be talking about Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush, which is basically the same song. It's the same themes, but I don't know, it's just so much more impactful there. So yeah, this new Taylor album, what did you make of it? Like, let's just jump right into our thoughts on it. Like, it's a big album, it's an epic, it's 18 tracks. And I guess part of me wanted to torture you, but another part of me was genuinely curious as to what would happen to you after hearing this whole thing, because you've never heard a full Taylor Swift album. So yeah, where are you now?
I don't think anyone's ever said so little and done so little new in such a long album. I think this is one of the most. This has been an amazing decade for boundary pushing pop. And in the back of my mind, there's always the Billboard, chart topping pop songs that like really does represent the genre in the mainstream. This is it. This was painful for an hour. Actually, I don't want to say painful, that's hyperbolic. But I was listening to this and God, I'm sure she is capable of it, but I couldn't say there was ever a bold artistic choice in the album, and that didn't feel like accidental or like a one-off that she probably thought was a fun thought one time in the studio. I want to get into the man because oh fucking hell. But yeah.
That's interesting. I found this album to be. I'm a lot more positive on it than you are. I thought it was a pleasant surprise. I think because of Taylor's own limitations as a songwriter and lack of willing to take risks, she isn't as good or as interesting as someone like Ariana Grande, who made like very mainstream pop that was genuinely fantastic this decade. And I hate to compare her to another female artist because she said in the album, please don't compare women who are killing it or something. But I generally couldn't think of any
You're
male
not killing it. Oh my
well,
God.
I genuinely couldn't think of any male pop artist who made a great mainstream pop album this decade. So
No.
it's not a gender thing. It's just Ariana Grande is the first one that comes to mind when I think of mainstream pop that was actually quite good. And I guess with this album being a pleasant surprise is it didn't take any risk. I agree with that, but it did take the lead from kind of artists like Ariana, like Carly Rae Jepsen, to try to do pop that seems more indie in aesthetic and more intimate. And I really vastly preferred this to like the stuff she was doing in the Red era, which is just like really fucking sterile and like, for me at least, impossible to get into. She fails a lot on this album. She fails a lot. But I think overall this project is a lot. I'm going full Mark Commode talking about Marvel mode. Overall, this project is a lot more endearing than it could have been, and I think there are moments on this I really like. Jack Antonoff is, in my opinion, probably to blame for a lot of the better moments on this album. He really brings a lot to it and raises Taylor's production values. And like, I don't know, I feel like songs like Paper Rings, I feel like if Jack Antonoff wasn't there, it wouldn't sound like, oh, this like feels like a somewhat fun and charismatic song with production that doesn't just sound like an Apple Mac computer. And so it's weird. I don't even know how much of the praise to give to Taylor for this album. I feel like a lot of the best things about it are just a product of it coming out in a time where it's more acceptable to put out a little bit more indie feeling mainstream pop music, as well as the help of the amazing production of Jack Antonoff, who he's just been all over the shop in the past 5 years. He's even all over the new Lana Del Rey album, which we're going to talk about, and he was all over the last St. Vincent album. So, I mean, he's just really doing the rounds as a pop producer.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, pleasantly surprised. But it has. I wish it was stronger. But yeah,
I'll say I just think she. I don't think she has an artistic bone in her body. I think she is a talented singer, but I don't think I've ever heard anything this by the numbers. Like, it is not bad. My biggest problem with this album is probably the lyrics and the aesthetic, which I'll get into in a second. But yeah, I just don't think she tries ever at any point in this album. And if this is her trying, I don't think she fits in with like people that are taking pop and femininity. Like, there are other female artists who are taking like their womanhood and just like being like unwarrantingly effeminate and doing actually interesting things with it. Whereas I feel like this is just like by the numbers pop with the air of like white Hillary Clinton feminism sprinkled on top. Like this album, like I'm gonna get into the lyrics right now. I feel like this album is reeks of little lines where it's like, oh, that could be a Tumblr bio. I feel like there's so many little like details, like, oh, the wine is cold, like the shoulder that I gave you in the street, which I wrote down as I heard the album, because I feel like these are just like childish things that a teenager would listen to and go like, whoa, because they've never actually had a proper relationship yet, and it's just this like idealized like bullshit like fairy tale thing, and it's like, god, just, I think that's the problem with the album for me. It feels so like disingenuous. It reeks of the industry and songwriters and ghostwriters. Like, I just couldn't take it seriously for a moment. This is probably the most artistically bankrupt thing I've heard. I don't know. I would rather spend my time listening to something like a lot less, like the 1975 or Billie Eilish, because at least when I listen to that, I can have like thoughts. I find unpacking why I don't like things really interesting, and I cannot really unpack why I don't like this very much because it has so little to say.
I'm in a really awful position because, like, so this album is at kind of a 6 out of 10 range for me, where I like it just about enough, but I'm not crazy about it.
Uh-huh.
However, because you're so negative, I'm kind of gonna have to play the role of defending things I liked about it. So it's gonna seem like this is like my album of the year or something. It isn't. But yeah, I think just to defend it, I think there is a. I agree the lyrics are bad. I agree the lyrics are bad. I think I think I get a sort of like Riverdale-esque enjoyment.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a very high. People should know this about me. I have a very high tolerance for bad lyrics. And and at a certain point, I just find it really endearing and funny. And there are moments in this album that feel like Riverdale. It's just corny and cheesy and hilarious. But I think there are moments of like a little bit more self-awareness than you're giving it credit for. For example, one of my favorite songs is False God. And she describes the relationship in like religious metaphor and like her their bodies as altars that they pray at, and it's like they know that the love that they worship is a false god, but they'll worship it anyway. There's a sense, there's something there of like an interesting metaphor. And, okay, this lyrically is my favorite song on the album, so I'm really picking at the highest fruit I could find. But deconstructing the idea of kind of an unabashed love album and questioning if it's foolish to be so unabashedly in love.
But then in the same song, there's lyric. I'll agree with you there. But there's points in the same song where she says, "I'm New York City, you're the West Village," and it just reeks of these like.
But how can you not? How can you not love that? It's so funny. It's great.
Shut up. You're so lost in irony. You can't hate. Search yourself. God, I can't be the only negative member of this podcast anymore. I'm gonna get into the man now.
All right. Okay, I'm 100% with you on the man. Obviously, as a man myself, I have nothing ill to say about women or their attempts to express feminism.
Okay, I do appreciate your restraint and not wanting to like overstep the line. But I will use the privilege of my womanhood to destroy this piece of shit, honey. If you wrote good music and compelling songs and didn't act like petty and childish throughout that entire drama, then people would be on your side. There are many men, like we brought up before, that have made bad music and have been ridiculed for it, have had dramas, have behaved poorly, and have been ridiculed for it. What I don't want to seem like here is that I'm saying like there is no privileges. Absolutely not. I'm saying in this very specific example, there is very concrete evidence that she behaved poorly and she knows that and apologized for it. So then to go back and write a song accusing people of saying that the reason that she was like, I guess, cancelled, quote unquote, which isn't really what happened, but it was along those lines. To go back and then write a song saying that it was sexism is just awful. And I feel like she's making those points in what's the phrase? In bad faith. I legitimately feel like she's using sexism as an extremely privileged person who's come from a rich family and is now even richer to be like, yeah, it was sexism when she's already admitted that she's done something wrong. And also like to say that she's like, you know, wondering if she'd get there quicker if she was a man. Where are you getting to? You are at the top. You are one of the most famous people. Like, what? What is your point? If fucking Rico Nasty made this song and said that thing, it's not well written, but I would at least go, yeah, she has a point. She is trying really hard and would be have gotten further if she was a white man. She's not though. She is a woman of color, and so she isn't as far as you. What are you talking about?
So for me, it was really easy to pick my favorite tracks for this album because there's maybe like 5 or 6 songs that I do genuinely really love, and yeah, my favorite track is "It's Nice to Have a Friend." I could understand how this track could be really boring to some or like underwritten. However, I really appreciate that a song like this landed on the Taylor Swift album. It genuinely like sounds like an Alex G ripoff of like a song like Salt, which is fucking crazy to say about a Taylor Swift album. Like her ripping off someone like Alex G. I'm very happy to see that. Of course, it's not original, but you know, I'm happy that the influences have changed. And I thought it was kind of a sweet, tender track and a vaguely like unusual kind of songwriting track that's more meandering than like trying to be this pop anthem. I enjoyed that song. I really liked the song Paper Rings. It kind of felt like a song you'd hear on 500 Days of Summer, and it kind of hit those kind of like, I don't know, indie pop from the early 2010 sweet spot for me. I Think He Knows is my third favorite track. I thought that slapped, you know. And the moments of this album that are my favorite is when she expresses that very like earnest, innocent Tumblr-esque sort of like love struck thing, but like with exuberance and energy. And I think He Knows is like one of the greatest examples of that. It does have like some annoying lines of her being like weirdly egotistical, like, oh, I understand why you're obsessed with me. It's like, okay, Taylor. Anyway, my least favorite track, the man is awful. Archer is awful. I'm cheating by just listing tracks I don't like right now. But my absolute least favorite is Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Kid.
Yeah.
It's the one. It's one of the songs where the kind of almost Riverdale level writing is not endearing. It's just very obnoxious and painful. God, I hate like the kind of pseudo drop it keeps doing with the okay and like the beat trying to go super like electronic and like dubstepy. Like that was a terrible track. Yeah. And I'll just go ahead and say my recommend for this. I'm gonna give this a very, 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 very weak recommend. And with the condition that only if you're like a poptimist, if you think this is an album you might like, if you generally go for kind of like more clean radio pop, I think this is like a decent album in that field. You could do a lot worse than it. It certainly isn't as unbearable to listen to as something like Sam Harris or what's the other Sam? The Sam that did the James Bond song, Sam Smith.
Sam Smith.
Like this is a lot better than something like Sam Smith, in my opinion. So like, I would give this a very weak recommend. Like overall, I think it's pretty inoffensive, and I think I enjoyed some of it.
Okay. I'm gonna start off with my least favorite track. And you know what? I just remembered another one. That's not The Man. I hate The Man, as I've made clear. However, there was something much more foul on the album, and when I saw it, which was actually just before the song that it was came on, so it was horrifying. I didn't have any chance to prepare myself emotionally for this, and that is Me, featuring Brendan Urie of Panic at the Disco. I think this is probably the worst song of the year. I think this is awful. The lyrics being the worst thing about this album stops being true with this song. His like anthemic stadium pop singing, I find like just awful and offensive, and really soured the end of the album. It's also a song that just has no place in the album. Like I feel like Taylor Swift did. If I'm going to say something positive about this album, it's that Taylor Swift did try to, make a statement. Like this is, she was deconstructing a romance album. The extent to which she's successful is heavily debatable. But she was trying. This song is just about nothing. It's just a Brendan Urie feature. Yeah, that song is, whew, that song hurt. There were only 2 songs left after that, and I considered calling it a fucking day after that song. Am I gonna bother with favorites? Okay. I think he knows. Soon You'll Get Better.
Oh wow.
I
thought. Wow. Okay.
It's pretty inoffensive.
Yeah.
It's just really like slow, lo-fi. Like nothing. There's nothing that happens in it that I'm like, oh, in it. The lyrics aren't that bad. It's nice to have a friend. I don't think there's ever been an album that's like, obviously I've had a response to it that is emotional now, but I don't think that I've ever listened to an album that I found so inhuman and like robotic in its construction that's meant that when I listened to it, once I finished listening to it, I genuinely just have no idea what I've just experienced, despite the fact that it is so conventional and so unoriginal. If my friend Ben is listening to this, he was excited for me to review this album and give it a chance because he loves Taylor Swift. I'm really sorry, and I forgot that you'd be listening to this when I started talking about it, and halfway through I remembered, and at that point I'd already committed to the vitriol, and I'm really sorry. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Taylor Swift.
Awesome. Okay. Well, moving on. Norman fucking Rockwell by Lana Del Rey. I'll just briefly go through my history with Lana Del Rey personally. Lana and I have had a very strange relationship in the past 5 or so years. I really love her first album, Born to Die. I think that many people were too quick to dismiss that album as kind of having like negative lyrics that aren't very feminist or being kind of a stereotypical Americana kind of project. But I think on that album, Lana does some really intelligent, clever, subversive takes on kind of these kind of bad boy ideas and masculinity in relation to femininity. And I think many of that album is very snarky and mocking of the very thing that people think it is. So I think that's a brilliant album. And then after that, I've always wanted to like her music. Every time a new album comes out, I dutifully listen to it and never really enjoy it. I don't know what happens. There's always like a single or two that I think are really good, and then the album comes out and it's overly long, really boring. But every 2 years I come back when I give it another shot, and I was waiting for her to come through with the album that will confirm, my love of Born to Die, that she is this like, low key pop genius, and blimey, I'm gonna say it. This is that album. When this came out, when Venice B Word came out as a single, I was so happy because I take a lot of shit for liking some of the things I like, and Lana Del Rey is one of them. And when Venice B Word came out, I was like, finally, I have like a good case to make when I defend Lana Del Rey's music and claim that she's still interesting and worthy of following. And upon release, this was met with mass acclaim. And I was just so happy to see it. My girl Lana finally came through.
But no, I don't think. I think there's a lot. She gets a lot of shit online, and I'm sure she's like, I've always been sure she's talented, and has something to her. Otherwise, I don't think she'd resonate with so many people genuinely. I basically had never. Oh, you showed me "High by the Beach." That was literally my only song that I.
And that was, I sent that as a joke because I thought it was bad.
Together, we watched it together. You were like, "What is she?" It was when you were telling like she fell off, and you were like, "What is this song?"
Yeah, because every time something bad happened in her career, I was just like, it hurt me so much because I had genuine faith in her. I believed that she could do better than High by the Beach.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. To get into my thoughts on this album, I'll come out and say it. This is the best album we're reviewing on this podcast today. I fucking love this. I think this is genius. I think this is amazing. Damn, you got so quiet.
Yeah, what you just said was a bro moment for me, but
I think we've had enough of your bro moment. The first time I finished this, I was blown away. I didn't know what to do with myself. I listened to it on my bed, and I was just sitting at home. I just sat on my bed and cried for like a good 10 minutes.
Jesus.
Yeah, this really hit me.
What? I love this album. So this is giving me life hearing this right now.
Okay.
What is it about this album that hit you emotionally in that way?
The vulnerability, like the first song, straight away, like she tears down any like perception of herself as like pretentious and over the top. I mean, being over the top is one of my favorite things about this album. But she tears down the pretense in that by saying something like, "You fucked me so like hard, I almost said I love you." Like that's so like human and like ridiculous. Even the album art is like embracing the drama and the like ridiculousness of it, which is something so like it's such a like privileged image. They're like, two attractive white people on a yacht with the American flag behind them,
and there's like wonderful kind of pop art explosion.
Yeah,
of the album time behind it.
Exactly. Like I like it's amazing how she like it's a testament to her as an artist that she managed to take that and play with it and unpick what that means for her as an artist. And how that's built on her vulnerability as a person. The last song on this is fucking devastating. Like, I don't think it's one of the weak. I don't think it's one of the strongest songs on the album, but fuck me, like, hope is it like I feel like so many critics of Lana who are like probably sexist critics who are just like, oh, she's woman and she sings about being a woman in a sassy way. I don't like that. But like, hope is a dangerous thing for a woman like me to have. Like, that's really sad that she like can see herself that way. Yeah, I that's my introduction over. I think this is amazing.
That's completely wonderful for me to hear. Honestly, like, I was grinning from ear to ear as you said that because these are the things I've been wanting people to say about Lana for so long, and it's, I'm so happy to hear that. I agree. Well, hope is a dangerous thing. For me, it's a disappointing closer. But I agree. I really like the sentiment behind it because like, my personal opinion is that the greatest should have been the final track. I just feel like that is such a closing song.
Mm.
Because she says like oh yeah, there's a great line from The Greatest where she sings, "I guess I'm signing off after all," which is a real kind of like, we're closing the album, like, and then it goes on for three more tracks. So I love Bartender and Happiness is a Butterfly. Don't get me wrong. I just wish The Greatest was the final track. Just in my head, it would be such an epic closer. But anyway, Norman fucking Rockwell, the opening track. You're completely right. Song, that first line, it feels like a Father John Misty line or something. Like,
Yeah.
it really brings out the satirical elements of her music, and it's so fun and hilarious. The song about like this pretentious man-child boyfriend who's like kind of like overly dramatic. He thinks he's like a poet, and he's really self-indulgent.
That is dating a soft boy. That is.
Yeah, it is a soft boy anthem, isn't it?
It is. It is a soft boy anthem.
Yeah. My own like my only thing of this album, like it would have been higher up, is I really feel like the first four songs own a complete league of their own. They're genuinely from like a 10 out of 10 album. And then the rest of it's from like an 8 out of 10 album, where it's still really great. But when Doing Time starts, and I fucking love Doing Time, it's a really fun song. It's great to listen to at house parties. But when it starts, it's like, okay, we're back in like normal music realm where I'm not just holding my breath the whole time during Fuck It, I Love You or Venice B Word because I'm so like in awe. I'm back in like I'm enjoying a really good song as opposed to that, music's so good that you can't even like breathe or listen to it.
Yeah.
Which is like where the first four tracks are for me. But no, like
I feel like every artist, good artist, has a moment where they have their album that completely surmises everything that makes them brilliant and special. And I haven't heard the rest of her discography, obviously, but I feel like this has to be it. This is songs like "How to Disappear."
oh my god, yeah.
Like I just, I think it's just brilliant. Like that ability she has to put every ounce of herself into this album, and like never tripping over herself in being too tongue in cheek or too over the top. It's always towing the line perfectly, and I just think like the loneliness that underpins this entire album is what makes it so great for me. Like, there's such a sense that any like companionship she has found is like a refuge, from like the brokenness that she's is when she's by herself. She's really struggling, and that's just really sad to hear. And like I think there's something about I think that's what hit me most about this album is like how you rationalize being alone versus being with a person when you're not doing best. Because it's an awful thing to have to consider. Because like love can trap you to someone, and I think that's what this album does really well. Like the funnest moment on the album doing time, and like it actually makes very little reference to like this person.
To give you some context for Doing Time, do you know it's a cover?
Oh my god, no!
Yeah,
Whoa.
so it's a cover of a song by Sublime. So the references to her girl were originally from that song. So
Yeah.
the reason
Okay.
I think the reason it feels less personal is because it's not her song. Yeah,
It still
just
feels
just
so
for some
like
context. So it fits the album really well. I'm just giving some.
no, no. Thank you for telling me that. But yeah, definitely still feel like to me, not knowing that the way I saw it was yeah like a break from this person, and that might have been why she included it on the album in just to represent like being apart from this person, and the beat becomes so much more like carefree and fun. Like I don't I think this album is so purposeful and driven. I don't think she would include something like this on the album without trying to make some sort of statement. Um,
Yeah.
Talking about that crack another beer line, the way she says, all of the guys tell me lies, you don't, you just crack another beer. Like, it's so sad because that line, all the guys tell me lies, but you don't, like the setup, like you're different, you're not like the other guys, you know, you're honest with me, you know, a decent, honest person. Um, and instead, it's replacing that like decency with like distance. He doesn't care enough to like lie and try and manipulate her perception of her. He's just honestly an asshole, which is horrible to think about. And
Mm.
so like, and that's where that feeling to like the feeling of the need to disappear comes from. Like, well, if this person doesn't consider me significant and I consider them so significant, then I must just be invisible. Like, why am I here?
Yeah, and I think there's also an aspect of criticizing sort of elements of toxic masculinity that take the form of disappearing. Like this man himself kind of disassociates from the situation and hides behind sort of these masculine symbols. Is I just wanted to praise Jack Antonoff for his amazing, amazing production. A couple of years ago, when the Saint Vincent album Mass Seduction came out, which was my least favorite Saint Vincent album, it's still a very good album, but you know Saint Vincent could do better. Uh, I was really angry at Jack Antonoff because I kind of blamed him for that album. I was like, "You're taking away my indie pop queen. You're making her less indie pop," and I'm angry. But you know, he's really earned my respect in the past 2 years, and I think this album, next to Taylor Swift's album, shows how amazing of a producer he is. Because the fact that you loved this album to a point of tears and hated the Taylor Swift album to a point of boringness shows that Antonov is a producer who like respects his artist, and if you hire him, he'll come in, he'll do what you want him to do as well as he can do it, and the product you get will like actualize your vision. Like I don't feel like he forces himself onto the sound of the artist he works with. I feel like he just brings out what they're trying to get across. So do you see what I mean?
I 100% see what
So
you
the
mean.
fact that he can produce something like that Lover album and then come around and he literally produced Venice B Word and Marina's Apartment Complex and Norman fucking Rockwell, which are some of the best fucking songs I've heard all year.
Yeah.
I think that's such. I think that just shows that he's such an amazing producer. He's like pops Kenny Beats right now. I love Lana, no secret there, but I also wanted to commend Jack Antonoff because I feel like this album is very much a part of his own accomplishment as it has. And
Yeah.
yeah, great job. Are you ready to move on to favorite and least favorite tracks?
Yeah. This is really hard though.
Yeah, I'm
um,
gonna let you kick it off.
I would say probably my favorite song is Norman fucking Rockwell, and that song was the moment that I knew it would be this beautiful, honest, and vulnerable thing. Like moments where she sings like "You Make Me Blue," as her like lyrics fade out and the instrumental becomes just so dream poppy and like yeah flamboyant. Like it's beautiful. Like it's honestly a gorgeous, gorgeous song. Uh, yeah. Next, I'll say "How to Disappear." Because like, yeah, it's just a really sad, sad song. That I think really beautifully sums up, like, just toxic relationship. And you get a real sense of her, like, as almost not having escaped from the mindset of like she's making art that perspective that she's still in, like kind of over romanticizing this person, but also at the same time being critical of it. And it's just this really interesting kind of oxymoron that I found really powerful. Yeah, Venice Bitch is pretty amazing. I was concerned when I saw a 9 minute 40-second long song, because like I remember you saying like she can like her the problems with some of her previous albums had been like being kind of self-indulgent and like you know just making things too long, and I wasn't sure how her songwriting was going to fit such a long thing, but she solved that problem by breaking the boundaries of her songwriting and just ascending into dream pop. and it's beautiful and sad and tragic. I think it's amazing to have an album so focused around artistic style and then just for one glorious moment acknowledge the shortcomings of that style in a longer format and make something beautifully exceptional. My least favorite song, Bartender. I just don't. I find that kind of a bit bland. I still think it's really fun. And I still like it. But I just
To tender.
yeah, like the hook is just a bit like it's really like cute. Like the way she does that. Yeah, I still think it's a great song. But it's just probably like whenever I think of this album, like that's always the song I think of last. So yeah, I obviously really highly recommend this album. I think it's honestly incredible. Um, I hope I've made it clear why I think it's amazing. I think she's amazing. Like I honestly like get goosebumps like when I think about this album. I think it's just incredible.
Fantastic. I'm gonna go for my favorite tracks now. So these are in no particular order, just in the order that they appear in the album. First up, Norman fucking Rockwell instantly kicks the album off with the best song Lana has written up to this point in her discography, and the album like gets better from here in some places. But this is such a watermark moment, or sorry, a watershed moment. It's absolutely stunning. It's lush. It's gorgeous. I love the swelling instrumentation. And I love that it's sent off with those melancholic, distant horns. I really love the playful, fantastic lyrics too, like we've already talked about. The lampooning of the soft-boy, pretentious literature type. I just think it's so completely endearing and snarky and wonderful. Next up, Fuck It, I Love You. I think this is an absolute banger. It's got great catchy lines, such as the line about like moving to California, but realizing you take yourself everywhere you go. I love that line. And yeah, I feel like this is just so sticky and well delivered. And it's exemplary of how this album, in my opinion, better than her previous works, does a great job at balancing the more contemporary, up-tempo lyrical delivery with the classic Americana vibe that Lana usually goes for. And lastly, The Greatest. This is an absolutely complete classic. It's nostalgic, lush, grand, gorgeous, like all the same words I used to describe the rest of this album. And the chorus just comes in so deftly. It's so kind of definitive as a moment. It's such a swell, a peak in the album, in the song itself. And when the track dwindles down after that, it really feels cinematic. Like you can imagine candlelight dwindling on Lana as she's the only singer left in the room. And it should have been the album closer, quite frankly. My least favorite track is California. This one just the chorus is just sour to me. It just doesn't go over well, and it's one of the few moments where I feel like the album does get a bit samey. It's such a great album that I don't mind the consistent sound, but this is one of the songs where it does start to feel a bit samey. It's not really a bad song. It's fine. I just found it a bit underwhelming, and honestly, I struggle to remember it sometimes.
I love California, man. It's so sad. Like it's she's trying so hard. Like just like to be like aloof and be like, oh, I'll pick you up if you come back to America. Just hit me up. Like, but the drama of the instrumental and of her voice, like contradicting that, is so sad and powerful. I understand why you don't like it though. I think I'm just.
I didn't even say I didn't like it. I just found it a tad more underwhelming than the rest.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And overall, I'd give this album a very, 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 very strong recommend. It's easily one of the best albums of last year and of the decade, and I really struggled with coming up with my favorite tracks for it. And it's just a completely fantastic album. There's so many like amazing lyrical moments that are just so catchy and well delivered. Like, don't be a jerk, don't call me a taxi, sitting in your sweatshirt crying in the backseat. Like she was really spitting. She was really spitting in this album.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say before we move on though.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I feel about this one line in the last track where she sings trying to get this black narcissist off her back.
Oh.
Do you remember that line?
What the fuck?
Okay, I could edit this out as we pull up the Genius, but go on the Genius lyrics.
The very last song.
Yep. I swear to God, this is. And I sat with my friend Will, who's another black man who likes Lana Del Rey, and we sat there. I'm pretty sure this line is racist. Like, I don't. We sat there trying to think of things it could mean, and we just couldn't think of anything other than it referring to a black person that she thinks. Maybe it was like Nicki. I don't know who it was about, but
What the fuck?
it's kind of dodge, right?
So apparently, yeah, media and fans speculated the term black narcissist was a person, specifically Azalea Banks, with whom Del Rey feuded back in 2018. The black narcissist is actually another version of herself, uses the color to describe the condition of depression in multiple songs, including 2014's Black Beauty and 2017's Great Free. Damn.
Okay, in the context of this chorus, let's read the whole verse. I think it sounds more about Azalea than about herself. So I've been tearing up the town in my fucking white gown like a goddamn sociopath, shaking my ass, and it's the only thing that's got this black narcissist off my back. She couldn't care less, and I never cared more. So there's no more to say about that. Like, the no more to say about that bit does sound like it's a shot, right? Like, it doesn't sound like she's singing about a metaphorical version of herself that's a narcissist who is. And honestly, even if it was a metaphor, can we stop using black as a metaphor for the evil version of us?
Yeah, that's pretty
there is no way to read this line that's like not dodgy in some way. I really don't think there is.
Yeah, that's pretty shitty. That's pretty shitty. Like, it's not. This is not a Nintendo game. Like from 10 years ago, you can't be like bad version of self, darkness, you know,
and like Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so man, that's not good. Because you're also probably right. I don't think she is talking about herself. It like shit. Maybe, but then, yeah, like you said, even if she is talking about herself, not great. What the fuck is she saying?
Honestly, it was a bro moment. Like I was enjoying the album so much, and I was like, wait a minute, what the fuck was that? Was that a hate crime, dude? But no, it's a great album, and anyway, so okay, so yeah, now we're gonna talk about Kate Bush's seminal pop classic, "Hounds of Love." Now, to set up, in my opinion, because I've already stated, I think this is a perfect album. I think this is one of the best albums ever written. As a teenager, it was in my top 10 of all time like albums. And I think what makes this album so important is it's one of the most high profile kind of mainstream pop albums that just tricked the mainstream into something very weird and experimental. And I think without an album like this, we wouldn't get kind of your Weekends or your Frank Oceans, you know, but these huge, big artists who try to do these crazy conceptual albums. We just wouldn't have that without Kate Bush, in my opinion. I think she really set the standard for like doing a mainstream pop album that charts really high. Like this album toppled Madonna's "Like a Virgin" song. Like it was the song. It had the singles to do that, and to have an album that high profile, this highly conceptual, that isn't like a rock album like the Beatles. I think it was like almost unprecedented. So that's one thing about this album that I think is so significant. Like I think the moment in "Waking the Witch," which as a younger man I used to find really fucking scary, when like the track just breaks and you just hear these distorted like vocal bits come in, and then this like demonic voice saying "You won't burn." Like it's almost like the album, in a very Ryan Johnson way, has just like, oh, you thought this was a normal pop album? No, you're in a nightmare now. You can't leave. And it's so yeah. Obviously, I adore this album, but yeah, what's your history of Kate Bush? Have you heard a Kate Bush album before? And like, what did you think about her generally?
So before this, this was one of those artists that my dad was like, "You're gonna like this artist, kid," with me. So like, I would hear like her songs played like completely contextless, like just on like CDs and things like that. So like, I had like a familiarity with like her style, and also like am familiar with like her significance in pop and her like kind of cultural image. And also I just had like I have like friends who are like hugely into her. I feel like she has such a presence whenever you talk about her. Like when you say Kate Bush, you already know exactly the aesthetic. Like it's so unique and like I just really like the kind of imagery that's associated with her.
It's almost like
And
Bowie. You can't say Bowie's name without seeing Bowie.
yeah, I think they have. I mean, I guess Bowie had like more like characters, but I view them as like equally kind of aesthetically driven artists for sure. So yeah, that's my history with Kate Bush.
So was this your first Kate Bush album?
It was my first full length Kate Bush album.
Blimey.
Yeah.
What was that like? I feel like there must have been a fear of it not it's so hyped up for you. Like
Oh yeah.
it
Yeah.
was there kind of an element of this is fine, but like I don't understand why it's been hyped up so much, or did it kind of meet your expectations?
I don't want to like make this way more boring because this is obviously so important to you, but I honestly think this is too weird for me. Which is like I guess that's interesting in itself. Because it's it was a really profound experience listening to this album because you said it yourself. She was so huge. And I don't think anyone's taken such a conventional genre and made it so weird. I cannot describe what it is that is so offbeat about this album. Like everyone talks about like her like the sound of it, and you think of these like really like easy to listen to, not in like a derogatory way. Yeah, so these really like nice sounding synths, and her voice is also she employs it in some weird ways, but it's like it's not. What I'm saying is this isn't shoo shoo. Like it's not inherently abrasive, but I think that's what makes this album so challenging. Is your brain hears these things that you're so commonly associated with conventionality.
Well, speaking about what you said about this being such a shock to the system, I wonder if this is something of a precedent for acts like Shushu, of like, because this is the earliest example I can think of like horror pop, like pop that tries to be horror at points.
Mm.
I can't think of an earlier example.
No.
I'm sure it exists, but I really do feel like this set the precedent for acts like Shushu who use pop kind of songwriting to make something horrifying.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. And as well as being like shocking, it is just offbeat and like strange. When it's not trying to scare you, like songs like Cloud Busting are just like bizarre.
Yeah.
And I really still don't know what to make of it. Like I'm 100% when this is on, I'm like, this is fucking cool. Like, but I really struggle with reckoning with this album, which is fun, I think.
So I try to map the concept out song to song because I've never fully sat down and tried to like track what's happening in the story for each song. So Kate Bush herself has called side one Hounds of Love and side two The Ninth Wave. And my theory is that the concept is that and it's not so much a theory, like most people have this reading, but the concept is that side one is kind of waking life. So the woman the album's about is awake in this side, and it explores her relationship with her mother on Mother Starts to Comfort, her father on Cloud Busting, her lover on Running Up That Hill, where she experiences kind of like the gender, inequality of kind of them both being in a similar professional career, but he's progressing further, and kind of her fear of intimacy in Hounds of Love. And this is all and her whimsy in The Big Sky. And it's all just like what this woman's like awake. So these tracks are the singles from the album. They're conventionally poppy in terms of like they're not trying to be super experimental. And these are the ones you'd hear on the radio. And so they're like resembling Waking Life, which is genuinely kind of more coherent. And then the Ninth Wave, what happens in the narrative is the woman sets out on like a boat kind of trek, and she is trying not to fall asleep because if she falls asleep, she's going to drown. And so throughout this entire section of the album, she's actually fallen asleep during Under the Ice, and she's actually dying for the next few songs, and kind of like she's in a weird dreamlike spiritual state where she's going through memories of her life, hearing the voice of like the seamen trying to rescue her from the ocean, which you kind of hear. It's kind of buried in the production, but it's there if you listen to it enough times. And then the final track is her finally being rescued and waking up again. So that is my theory as to why the second side of this album is so weird, because it's trying to convey this kind of sleep logic, dream logic, nightmare realm of freezing to death and having hallucinations.
Yeah, I think that's the most interesting idea with this album, is unpicking it. I like her expression on the album art is so like disaffected. It's almost like challenging you to like understand what she's doing with this. She definitely had like punk energy and just being like, I am gonna write this. Like, I don't think she was just being like, I'm gonna write a wacky album. She was
wacky.
Like, she was trying to challenge taste. And like, I think that's what I find most exciting about this. But yeah, I kind of feel bad because I almost don't feel like equipped to review this yet. I feel like I need like months to understand.
That's really odd, because I think that we covered the Shoo Shoo album Girl with a Basket of Fruit, and I think that's way harder to deconstruct than this is. I think that's really weird.
I would agree.
You were fine with that. Like...
I think because it's like it's like I said, like Shoo Shoo, who are like becoming one of my favorite bands, like working, and Go with Basket of Fruit is clicking me more like all the time, because I just keep going back to that I can like I expect. It's like home ground. I'm like, oh, this is I know what I'm getting into with a Shoo Shoo album. Like it's going to be strange. Whereas Kate Bush, the kind of tools she implements, like I said, are so conventional usually, and then so hearing those same things like be employed so fucking strangely by a mainstream artist.
So an album like this, I really feel like it both has the perfect songs. Like Hounds of Love is legit one of the best pop songs I've ever heard in my entire life. But also like conceptually, this album is just compact and like really clear. The whole narrative is in the album cover. It took me forever to see this. I originally thought she was wearing a fur coat because I didn't have the vinyl, so like on my phone it just looked like a fur coat. But when I put up the image of it, I see that she's actually hugging two dogs, which I didn't realize before. And she's laying in water. Her hair's kind of floating above the water. And I think this really encapsulates the narrative of this album. And you get kind of a narrative about femininity and guilt. It's still quite dense, and I haven't fully unpacked all of it. But Mother Stands for Comfort is a narrative about kind of a young girl who's done a murder, and the mother knows, but she responds in kind of a maternal, accepting way. And I think the murder is kind of a metaphor for, I don't know, self-hatred, depression, guilt, mental illness, those kind of things. And kind of, we have to respond to that with kind of care, which is typically characterized as maternal. I think this album definitely characterizes it as maternal. The track is literally called Mother Stands for Comfort. And then in the second side of the album, you get similar themes of guilt and feeling like you've done a crime in songs like Waking the Witch. But it's recontextualized with male voices going through kind of the motions of sort of like a witch hunt trial kind of setting, right? And it's like demonic and scary. And there's a real distinction between that comfort of the mother earlier on and the punishment of like men in her life. This feeling of men as kind of this oppressive force in her life. And I think that's just so conceptually interesting and powerful. But it goes beyond that. There's also this theme of like vulnerability and intimacy. And earlier on in the album, the metaphor of hounds of love are hunting her. It's in my opinion, I read it as sort of like she's afraid to let love in. She sees them as hounds and they're going to kill her, rip her apart. And in the last half of the album, when she finally comes back after through all of the kind of drowning, which in my opinion is a metaphor for kind of, isolating yourself, refusing help, drowning in self-hatred and guilt. In the final track, she finally lets people in again. She accepts love and she lets the hounds of love catch up to her. You have her telling her mother, her brother, her sisters that she loves all of them and she kind of accepts everyone again. And it's just, God, it hits me so hard. Like when your concept is rolled in with your songs in such a strong way that is emotionally impactful by the conclusion of the album and actually elevates the album when you sit down to think about what it's actually saying conceptually. That is a 10 out of 10 album for me. And it just completely bowls me over. And yeah, that's my whole manifesto on the album.
Damn, that was beautiful.
Are you ready to move on to favorite and least favorite tracks?
Absolutely, I am. Yeah. Do you want to go first?
So before I say what my favorite tracks are, I want it to be known that this is almost a pointless, meaningless task. I think every track on this album is phenomenal. And yeah, so one way I'm approaching this is look, everyone knows The Big Sky is amazing. Everyone knows Running Up the Hill is amazing. And everyone knows that Cloud Busting is amazing. These are some of the biggest pop singles of the 80s. So I'm not going to include those songs because, yeah, we all know they're good. So I'm going to try to pick some of the deep cuts that took me a really long time to appreciate more. So first up is Hounds of Love, which immediately contradicts the rule I just set out because it is one of the biggest singles. But this song is just one of the best pop songs of all time, one of the best songs ever written. And the idea of the waking anxiety of a demon chasing you and this being like a hound of love and kind of this utter fear of intimacy like that's explored in this track contradicted with the whimsy of just giving yourself over, of like throwing your shoes into the lake and then you're 2 steps from the water. This idea that you could just give yourself to something that's completely irrational and almost transcend, walk on water, even if it's only metaphorical. It's just completely gorgeous. And as a song, it's just impeccable sonically. Watching You Without Me, I've always found this to be a really difficult song to unpack, and it's always seemed quite opaque to me. Now, hearing it now, it's clear to me that it's kind of like So, have you seen the film Ghost, starring Patrick Swayze?
I have not seen the film Ghost starring Patrick
This
Swayze.
this song is like Ghost. It's like, so in the film Ghost, Patrick Swayze dies at the beginning, and he kind of like walks through his life as a ghost and like sees people in his life living without him, right?
Hmm.
And this track is kind of like that. It kind of tells the story of the narrator in the dreaming world, going to her old home and watching people live on with her life, and it's really cool. And I think I love the kind of like dystopian fantasy, almost like steampunk instrumental behind this that reminds you of a level out of Chrono Trigger. I think
Can I just say,
yeah, go on.
I love that you could have compared that song to A Ghost Story, but you went straight to Ghost starring Patrick Swayze. I'm really proud of you.
Another track I think is really cool is The Morning Fog. I love this idea of like returning to waking life, waking up. I imagine her like in a bed and her loved ones are around her. It's like the end of Wizard of Oz. And again, I get real like SNES JRPG vibes from this album track. Like I feel like the whole album is like the perilous quest, And this is like, the end of a JRPG when like everything's fine and they play like, the lovely music and all the characters are celebrating together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that vibe. And my least favorite track is Mother Stands for Comfort. It's an amazing song, but I think of all the songs here, it's probably the least kind of challenging. I'm obviously going to give this album the strongest of recommends. It's a sublime experience and an utterly perfect album. So just give in to Kate Bush and listen to the Hounds of Love. Let the Hounds of Love hunt you.
Oh. Yeah, I'm gonna start off with my least favorite, just because I agree with you. I find Mother Stands for Comfort. When I listen to that song, I know I'm not gonna like it more with time because it is probably the most simple and least interesting song. And in my 3 favorite tracks, I really, really like Jig of Life.
Yes!
I love a bit of like Celtic culture representation.
Oh, so good.
As an Irish gal.
Post-colonial type beat.
Yeah, exactly. I also love Cloud Busting. I just like really like the pop sensibilities of that one. Yeah, I really like Hounds of Love. Hounds of Love. Just like anthemic and really nice, and I really like her like powerful femininity in the song. Yeah, I do recommend because I think at the very least you'll find it interesting.
What
Yeah.
film? What films?
You can edit that out.
What films are we discussing next time?
Um, okay. So, as it's been a while since we've done a film episode, I'm going to hugely indulge myself, with my picks. And I'm going for a horrible, uncomfortable paranoia episode. And with that, we are discussing The Lighthouse. And for our older review, we're doing It Comes at Night.
And with that, I believe we've ticked all the boxes.
I think we have.
So thanks for joining me today, Mattie, to talk about these wonderful albums.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And we'll see you all next time with The Lighthouse and It Comes at Night.
All right. Yeah, thanks for listening. Bye.
Signing off.
All right, Picard.
No, I'm trying to do the Lana Del Rey thing where she says she's signing off.
Oh, but it was so Star Trek.
It was quite Picard. I'm full of shit. I was trying to be Picard.